Happy Tuesday, everybody. I hope you are enjoying the sunshine out there. It's so nice. So this video is it's following up from the last video that I did, and basically the years that passed after those two incidents that happened to me when I was 16, that changed my life forever. So I just want to talk about, what it's like living with that trauma, living in that fear and guilt and shame, and just you're like in a bubble. Your life has changed and you don't know where to go. You don't know where to run. You don't know who to talk to. You suddenly can't trust anymore. And there was a lot of change going on in my life at that time. As I said before, I was in a new school, so with a new set of people. And because of that, there's this drift with the other people in your life. And it's not a bad thing, and it's not that people do it on purpose. It's just we were in school every day and all of that, and then there's different things go on, and as teenagers we do move around different friends and groups of people, etc. I did meet and hang around with lots of different people at that time. People drifted in and out and of my life. So basically I was living in fear. Now, when I say I was living in fear and I was living in shame and living in guilt and all of that, I didn't know I was living in an altered state all of the time. I didn't know this was happening, because when it happens, you're in panic mode and it's your new reality. And I went into survival mode. So fight or flight, freeze, fight, flight. And I suppose, and it's running, just running from yourself, running from situations, running from normality, running from familiarity, running from people you love, running from people you care about, running from your closest friends, just running and running and running. And I blocked. Now, when I was hanging around and growing up and going to the local pubs and the local nightclubs and all of that, in my area, which is, I always kind of hung around my area, and in my area there was always that fear of bumping into these people and their friends, because I was a laughing stock. I was kind of the second guy had told his mates that I had falsely accused him of rape. So when I'd pass them in a pub, they would, under their breath, they'd scream, they'd do like a girl going, rape, rape. And if I was with other people, just the absolute fear of that they'd hear. And I was with people and they did say, what are they saying? Are they talking about you? And I'd say, no, no, no. And then the other guy was with his, I think he was about, I'm going to say 18 or something. Now his girlfriend was only 14. I was 16, going on 17. She was only 14. That girl was a lovely girl. I knew her from school. She was younger than me, in probably a year or two younger. I knew her sister to see in school. I know she'd people in the school. And she seemed like a lovely girl. So she was going out with the first guy, basically. And she believed him. She couldn't. The reality was, it's only years later you look and you say, God, she was only 14 when I think of it, the influence he would have had over her. But the appalling idea that she was only 14 and he was 17, 18 is quite shocking to me now, Anyway, they ended up getting married. They ended up having 2 children. But what happened to him was, I eventually found out. So I will go into what happened in the years kind of, later. I'm kind of going in the interim now and just saying, how it affected my life. The second guy told people that I had, accused him, and everyone found that funny. The problem with him was he had done this before and had been accused, in inverted commas, several times before. So anyway, I just got on with my life. I mean, obviously we have to survive. I went on with my life. It affected me in the sense that if I met a beautiful boy when I was 18, and I won't go into that particular experience. I was crazy about him, and absolutely crazy about him. And eventually he was crazy about me, and we went out with each other. And I remember when I was going out with him, just constantly getting really drunk and hating myself, this darkness. I know now today I had really deep depression, and I was pushing him away because he was too good for me. He was just too good for me. I was damaged, I was bad, I was dirty. So I pushed him away. Now, other things happened in that relationship, and as I said, I won't go into it. And, there's other things that have happened that have changed my life forever as well. But let's just deal with what I'm dealing with. So basically, I pushed anyone that was nice away. And there were lovely boys along the way, and young men and men, as life went on. And I couldn't, I didn't like nice boys. I just didn't. I always went for the really unavailable, the ones that treated me badly. And I just felt I deserved that. And that's not something I consciously do. It's something in the subconscious. Okay, so I'm self-abusing. Basically, I'm drinking, I'm smoking cigarettes, and, I'm just a mess, basically. Now, in all of that, during all of that time, I went and I did, went to college, and I did courses, and I educated myself, and I got good jobs and all of that. And in those years, my beautiful brother died of lymphoma. My gorgeous brother Paul died at 27. I was 21. No, I was 20. And he died in the April on his 27th birthday. And that was absolutely horrific for me. When he was dying, I wouldn't go out. I couldn't go out. I did attempt to go out a few times, and I ended up just sitting in the corner crying and all of this. And watching my mum suffer with her beautiful boy dying, and it was horrific, absolutely horrific. So that went on, and I eventually moved to France, and I au paired in Strasbourg, and I was in college over there doing French and German. Everything seemed normal. I adored those children, absolutely adored them. Stayed there for a little over a year, came back, and then went off to Paris and worked in Disneyland Paris. Had an amazing time and met new friends. And I remember when I got there, I met this guy, and I mean, the first night I spoke to him, I was telling him my story, and wanted him to push me away. And I remember he hugged me and said, "You'll be okay." And he was the only one to this day, genuinely, I was 21, and he's the only one to this day who said that to me, and I believed him. I never really believed that I was acceptable to anyone else after that. He's another day for another story. That was another traumatic experience for me, and wonderful. So you'll hear that in my life I've these kind of difficult experiences and challenging experiences, and then if you flip it to the other side, they're positive, and there's beautiful parts as well. It isn't all negative. I just the trauma has gone in there. The I say damage, it's not the right word to use, but a lot of stuff has happened that has, I suppose, changed my psyche and not who I am, but how I react and how I am in situations. So basically, so you're living in like, I'm living in my area and all that, but I've moved now. So I've moved to France, and then I came back and I moved again. And that was amazing, just to get away, and not to be walking down the road in fear, afraid, just afraid, feeling I could be myself, and feeling just that, weight was lifted off me, and I could paint a new canvas, and start again, and pretend I'm someone else, really, because you just pretend that nothing happened. I blocked everything. In France, I left Disneyland Paris, and I ended up working for amazing companies. I did really well over there and met amazing people, had fabulous experiences. And again, over there, met somebody lovely who liked me, and I pushed them away. Now, at this stage, I was an absolute mess, it was really catching up on me, everything. And so anyway, all of that went on, and and just on a basic level, I had to live. I came back anyway. I came home when I was 28. I stayed in France. I went to London, blah, blah, blah. And I came backwards and forwards, and then would go back again or whatever, But when I came back, I always wanted to live abroad, but when I came back, I really had to make this decision that I needed to love Ireland and stay, in Ireland, and embrace it. And I had 2 years of absolute darkness when I came home from 28 to 30, as in I continued using alcohol as a crutch, and again walked into great jobs. I studied then, but at night, public relations, and I've always done things in my life, and studied and worked, and I always went for the best jobs I could, and I loved working as well. I actually loved working, but I'll go into all that another time. But so, that happened, and so I found another path when I was 30. Again, I'm not going to go into full detail with that now, because it will be a 10-hour video, right? I will do these snippets. I'll come back to them, and it might all make more sense. But basically, I got help, and tried to deal with all my problems, and I attended a certain place, and I got help there for a few weeks, and then I got help seeing a therapist for a couple of years, and then I helped there as well. So I was voluntary doing groups in that place, and I was doing courses with them, and I loved it. And I was I was on their committee, and we were doing charity work and all of this, and it was to help people like me who'd gone through certain things, and it was just a new path for me. So that was fine. And I was very involved in that centre, actually, and became friends with the therapists and with the people who worked there. And it was just a lovely community. We'd garden parties. And then I, in turn, would help other people who, were going through whatever and all the rest. So it was just really nice. And at one stage, they used to do these medallion ceremonies once a year. So you'd go back and you'd get your medallion, and it was just lovely. And my mum was very involved with it. And She was just so proud of me, and it was a wonderful time in my life, I have to say. I was like 30 and a half, say, when I started that journey, and it was just a beautiful beginning of a new life, and I loved it, and it was wonderful. And I worked really hard at myself and did everything that was suggested I should do. And so it was a few years went by, and as I said, I did voluntary work there and all of that. And I was seeing, because I was doing voluntary work, you had to see a therapist to kind of say, well, how are you dealing with, the patients or the clients or whatever it is. And I had this lovely, lovely therapist. I had an amazing therapist, and then he left. I had him, and then he was just an angel. And then I had this other wonderful man as well, and I think he's retired now. But so that was fine, and I was invited to the medallion ceremony. So that was lovely, and you're looking at all the people that you're dealing with on a weekly basis, and you're helping them out, and they're standing up there with their wives, husbands, children, mothers, fathers, depending on what their situation is, and you're so proud of them and all of this, and it's wonderful. And then we went off, and we were having teas and coffees and biscuits and cakes and all in the hall. And I look across the hall, and I'm talking to one of the lovely therapists who ended up my friend. And she was amazing. Like, she worked with trafficked women and all these women who, were abused and everything. She, on a voluntary basis as well. Now, she was employed by this place, but she did a lot of voluntary work, and she was amazing. And I was chatting away to her, and all of a sudden I see the first guy who raped me. And I literally almost died. I hadn't seen him in years and years. And I just couldn't believe it. And so I touched this therapist friend beside me, and I said, oh my God. And she said, what? And I said, he raped me. And she said, what? And I said, he raped me. And she said, who? And I pointed, and she said, are you sure? Him? I said, what's his name? And she told me, and it was him. And I went, oh my God. So she pulled me aside with somebody else. We went into another room, and I was in complete shock. And I said, what's he doing here? And she said, well, he's training to be a therapist, and we're thinking of taking him on to do, for his training. We're thinking of taking him on. I think you can work part-time or whatever. And the person who was mentoring him was my wonderful therapist, this male therapist, beautiful gentleman. So she said, oh my God. So she called him. He was in shock. And he said, what? I can't believe this. So anyway, I was talking to them, and I was saying, what do I do? These people knew me for years, and they were saying, I said, what should I do? I don't know what to do. And, they said, eventually, the one that I was telling you that was beside me, she said, you need to go to the police. And I said, oh, I don't know. I'm afraid. And she said, you need to go to the police. So that's what I did. So I went to the police, and I told them I had a story to tell them, but it was from, I think it was 25 years previous. So I think I just got in the door of, that I don't know what it's called, but you has to be within a certain amount of years, which I find shocking. Sorry, this camera's doing its own thing here. So I went to the police, and that was really stressful, very traumatizing. I was hours doing a statement. So the first day they called me in, they said, well, you need to get into the car with us and bring us to where it happened. And I was saying, well, the roads have all changed now. It's a shopping centre and all of this. And I knew it was the mountains, Rathfarnham Mountains. So I brought them to the place. Now, there was this guy, he was a detective and a younger guard. And I knew, I was in the back of the car, and I knew intuitively he knew the guys that I was talking about. He knew them. I knew by him. He seemed really nervous, really uncomfortable. He kept looking, anything I said, he kept looking at the detective, and I just knew, and I felt so embarrassed. These two lovely young men. And so we went up, and I remember wanting to vomit. They had to stop the car, and I was trying to get sick. And I'll never forget the pains and cramps in my stomach and the feeling of being just, it was like this knot in my stomach that was making me feel sick, and I couldn't breathe. Then I got this migraine out of nowhere, this migraine. I felt shocking. Oh my God. So they brought me back to the station, and I went home, and then I was to go in, I don't know, I can't remember, but I had to go in anyway and give a statement. That statement took hours, and the young guard wasn't there. It was just the detective on his own. He did ask, did I want somebody else with me? I said, no, it's fine. So I gave him the details of the two guys. So remember, it's the first guy in the car and the second guy up the lane, who was his cousin. So it just took, the detective was very nice. It was a bit embarrassing, a bit cringy, because you have to remember, I'm the one that feels the shame. I'm the one carrying all of that. It just took so long. It took so long. I'll be honest, it took 3 years. Once I went into the public criminal, whatever it is, I don't know, it's a public case anyway, but once it went in there, I had to wait 3 years. And I waited the 3 years, and in that 3 years I was followed by the first guy and his wife. They approached me in a pub it was during the day, and it was an Ireland match. I went with my friend, and they approached me and were taking photos in my face on their phone and pushing me. And the wife came into the bank in my village and pushed me, and my bag and everything fell on the floor, and all my papers. She threatened me, and every time I went, I rang the police, and they'd say, if there's anything, tell us. And because I was afraid, and they were saying, look, you're better off not putting this in writing. You're better off. It worked out that the first guy ended up a taxi man. He is a taxi man, right? So think about what happened to me. He picked me up on the side of the road and brought me up the mountains, right? So you think about, how do people, if you really want to do something, how do you do it? My phone is going in and out of, I don't know what it's doing. I'm sorry that I'm coming up close and going away from you. So he was a taxi driver, which really shocked me and, made me quite annoyed. I found out a lot of things. He was a taxi driver. He had 2 daughters. So I was actually working in an organization, I won't say the organization, so that has all information on children and schools and all of that. And I told them, you go to them. and you tell them. So I wrote a letter to them stating that I was very, very worried that this person who I'd made a statement about was driving a taxi. Could they look into him? And I got a thing back and they said no. And if I wanted to take it any further. Now, remember, I've waited 3 years for this. I mean, the whole hullabaloo. I had to give statement after statement. There was a lot of embarrassing stuff I had to do and say. And, I had to go to a psychiatrist. I went to the Rape Crisis Centre. When that all happened to me, it was after 2 years I rang the Rape Crisis Centre and I said, I'd like to see somebody. And they said to me, when did it happen? And I said, 2 years ago. And they said, our waiting list is 1 year. And I hung up the phone and never did anything about it, ever. So I did, through the Gardaí, they did send me to the Rape Crisis Centre, and I went, and the lovely man who I told you was my therapist in that place where I was helping other people and everything else, he asked me how I was with the Rape Crisis Centre, who I'm sure are wonderful, but I felt it was just re-traumatizing myself. I was going over and over what had happened, and the only thing I really got from it was that I have fibromyalgia. I've pain from head to toe, and I've arms that if something happens to me and I'm frightened or I hear bad news or something, my arms would just drop. My arms would just go completely weak. And she explained to me, which was really good, she explained to me that, that's because I tried to fight off with my arms in both cases, and my arms failed me. So my arms just go weak. It's where the memory is. So it was interesting that she also said fibromyalgia. Most people who have been abused in any way get fibromyalgia. A lot of women get it. And the other interesting thing I learned in the Rape Crisis Centre was that they get a lot of calls on a Monday morning after the weekend from women who have been attacked. And I have a lot of friends who are taxi men, so I'm not saying taxi men are bad at all. I do not get taxis, and I haven't since I found out that he's a taxi man. I can't get a taxi, just can't. I cannot get a taxi. I did get a taxi I was in not Cyprus, I was in Croatia, and that's another story I'll tell another time. But I actually had no choice. I was in the middle of nowhere at the airport, and I was just walking and I wouldn't get into the taxis because I was afraid of them all. They all seemed, I just didn't trust them. And then a guy picked me up and he said he was a taxi, and I was screaming and I ran and la la la. Anyway, it's a big long story. I did get into the taxi. It was a really iffy area. Anyway, so I have a terrible fear of taxis, and I just thought that, I also know from the detective who I was dealing with, he said, I asked him about taxi people in Ireland, and I said, are they vetted? And he said, they are not vetted. And I said, could they be rapists or murderers or whatever? And he said, yes, we don't have proof of, like, we cannot know every taxi driver or whatever. So it's just a thing that really scares me, and then you hear about all these people who disappear, like I just wonder where all these women who disappear out and men who I often just wonder, where are they? And it's just one of my theories. So I just found it startling that he had 2 daughters, and obviously the daughters have friends. He drives a taxi, and he also started, because he was becoming a therapist, he started helping people. And the people he focused on, I discovered afterwards, a lot of people had told me this, that he was focusing on young women, young vulnerable women who had been through traumas and all of that. Then I met people who knew him from years ago, guys, and they were saying that he was a dark, dark character and still was. The police told me that he gave them chills. And the other guy as well, but him in particular gave him chills. And the father of the other guy, they found evil, because he's the one that came to the house and threatened me that he would burn the house down and kill my family, which I believed for years, terrified of him. Works out that that man was he had a car garage where the other guy worked as well. His son worked, and he had a garage which fixed cars and did tires and all that kind of thing. And his contract was with the police in my village. That was his contract, was with them. So he knew all the police in my village, in that station. He worked on their cars. So now I see why he got such a fright and all of that. And but isn't it frightening how he covered up other rapes that his son did also. As time went on, and during the years previous, his son got into drugs and everything else, serious hard drugs. He had a daughter who I believe, I just saw on social media, I do believe he loved her. I think he split with that mom, and then I think he met somebody else and he had a couple of boys or something. And then after all this happened, and during COVID, I got a call from the detective, and he said that guy, the second guy, the cure head, do you remember I called him the cure head last time? So the cure head, he, with the father who threatened me, he hung himself. Now, when I heard that, I got such a fright. Like, my immediate reaction was, oh my God, that's terrible, to the Garda that called me the detective. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. Now, I believe his father molded him. His father is a horrible man. Horrible man. I remember him being a horrible man when I was a teenager growing up anyway. He wasn't a very nice man. And then, you see, as time goes on, like, I had this lovely man, neighbour of mine, came around to fix my car and was chatting away and said, actually, I can't fix it. Why don't you bring it to the garage that I'm talking about, the guy whose father, blah, blah. He said, he's my cousin. Do you know what I mean? So then you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know who is who. Everyone's related to everyone. Everyone knows everyone. The connections are unbelievable. I'm in the same area. So it's just really difficult. People I know are kind of friendly with the girl who's married to the taxi driver who was the first guy. And then I made friends with this lovely girl and her brother, absolute gorgeous. I was about, I don't know, I was in my early 30s, and me and this girl and another girl became really close. We were best friends. We hung around together. Now, she had friends from growing up from the age of like 5, the whole way up. She's a really solid group of friends and still has to this day. And I met her and this other girl, and we used to do angel cards together and yoga and go to each other's houses and chat. And it was just lovely. We became very close. And her brother, who I'd known since I was a kid as well, they're from the area, he got engaged, and I went to his engagement. And who walks in? Only the guy, the first guy, the taxi driver, with his wife. And I said to one person beside me, a friend of mine, a guy, I said, "Oh my God, do you remember I told you?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, that's one of them. And he went mad. Like, I had to say, "Please don't say anything, don't do anything." We left. But I asked my friend, my gorgeous friend, I said, who's he? Why was he there? That guy, and that girl. I didn't tell her to this day. I never told her. I said, and I'll tell you why. She said, "She's my first cousin." I was like, oh my God. Like, do you know what I mean? So I never told her because I didn't want to upset, whatever. I don't know, just a mixture of, I'm embarrassed to tell her that her cousin's husband raped me. I'm embarrassed. I'm afraid it's just all these feelings. It's all very confusing. So there was that. Just loads of things over the years, like you go into a pub and you're meeting friends and they're suddenly sitting with the second guy, the curehead, and you're going, "Oh God, please don't say anything." Like, I'm afraid, I'm ashamed, I'm afraid. Another time I was in my village in a video shop. Do you remember the videos in those days? In a video shop, and my fiance, who actually, that's another story, my God. Anyway, that's never happened, never married him. But my fiance is beside me, and he goes, "Oh my God, there's my mate, beep, and there's the cure." And he goes over to him and they hug each other, and he's saying, "Oh, I met him at a party." And they were chatting. And I never told him. I never told my fiance. Again, the fear. I was afraid. I don't know if people relate to this, but you're constantly in fear of being found out. I remember another girl told me, I've met over the years, and I wouldn't necessarily tell them that's my story too. When somebody has told me in the past that they were, sexually abused as children or raped or whatever it is, I never said to them, "Oh, so have I." I would listen to them and, and just be there for them. It would depend on the situation, I wouldn't want to take away from their story or whatever. Again, the shame's still there, even though it happened to them and I'm comforting them, I'm still ashamed of my story. And I remember one girl saying she got home near her house and she was drunk, and the taxi guy stopped the car around the corner from her house and got into the back of the car with her and raped her. And her fear was, it was bizarre to me, but as the years have gone by and I've done therapy and I've met other people and I've talked to specialists in this, I know that's a normal reaction, but she was afraid her tummy looked big. Like, I remember her saying that and me thinking, that couldn't have been rape. That couldn't have been rape. I've met a girl whose grandfather, father and uncles and brothers raped her. I've met another girl where her grandfather raped her for years. I met another girl whose father raped her and she had 2 children, and I've met so many people. I met a man who, he ended up a monk and he ended up homeless, and then he died. But he was gay, became a monk, and they kicked him out, and then he became homeless and he died on the streets. But I met him when he'd been on the streets and got off the streets, and then I heard he went back on the streets or whatever. But his story was, from the age of 5 till 12, he was on his own with his mother, who is an alcoholic and very violent. He literally was on his own with her in a bed sit, and she raped him from 5 to 12, and he ran away. there's so many stories out there. There are so many stories. You know, there are horrific, and it's like anything. We always hear worse. We always hear people who have had much worse situations, and you know, but it actually helps me to know I'm not alone. It really helps me to know that I am not alone in this. That's really important for me. And again, I wanted to join a group therapy thing for with the Rape Crisis Centre, and there's other things, but it takes years to get into. You have to do a certain amount of therapy, then I think it's 2 year waiting, and then I did find one, and it was quite expensive for a week. Like for a group therapy, you don't mind, like a private therapy session is, you know, 60, 70, whatever. But to do a group therapy, and I think it was around 60 a week, and that was a lot. And I was doing therapy as well, so I couldn't afford that. But I think a group situation will be very good. And there's just, you know, I have a big passion, and, well, not like, I don't know how you'd say it, but I abhor and get really upset about trafficking and child trafficking and all of that. There's so much darkness in the world, and, you know, it's horrific. So I know that people have gone through shocking incidents in their life. But I just want to say that through all those years, with the lack of self-esteem and the lack of confidence and just, you know, self-blame and all those things, I made how would I say, I was going to say wrong decisions, but I don't want to beat myself up again. You know, I made decisions that were, you know, I know, like, I made decisions that I wouldn't have made if these things hadn't happened to me. I wouldn't have made the decisions I made if I hadn't been using alcohol as a crutch. It does change you on a level, and I don't like saying that because it gives power to those people. And you know, it's not only I always had compassion for the wife, because I thought she was 14, and then she loved him and she married him and everything else, and then she had children, 2 girls, and then was she and then part of me doesn't understand that. So, like, I mean, I had anger, and, you know, against her. I'd anger against him. I'd anger against the other guy. And then I'd anger against his father. And then I'd anger against the people who believed them. And, you know, and then I just tried to forget it all, and then I bring it up, and I do put myself out there, and I go to the police, and then and there wasn't enough evidence, which fair enough after all those years, but they wouldn't look into, what annoyed me was they wouldn't look into other people that I know that they had, well, the second guy had, you know, done the same thing to. They wouldn't even contact those people. Then the first guy, they wouldn't even check being a taxi driver, like, you know, go back into people who had made complaints or whatever. It just, nothing was looked at. And I really felt, I know that these cases don't win. I know, I was told, but I felt I needed to be heard. So they were brought into the station, and I was told that they just gave chills. They gave chills to the people who interviewed them. They just, like, they used the word evil. And so it's just not a nice thing to go through. You know, some people go through terrible things and they're fine. You know, like people lose parents when they're very young and it doesn't affect them. They're very sad, but it doesn't affect them, and they live a very normal life. And then you have some people who, you know, are sexually abused or physically abused or whatever it is, and then they do well and get through life and all the rest. And then there's some people that things really affect them, and I'm one of those people. I was listening to a psychologist today, I never heard of him before. Dr. G, talking to somebody on YouTube about Harry, Prince Harry, and I felt really sad for him going around the doors. Now I've been very kind of I against him and Meghan, to be honest. But when I saw him knocking on the doorbells, I don't know, it was just, I was very annoyed by his interview about his father and the security. But when I saw that, and this, the psychologist, Dr. G, said that he lost his mum at 12 and now he feels rejected by his family. Whether he's done them wrong or not, he feels now rejected and he's re-traumatized. And it really just makes me think about people in general, but me. So I lose my dad and now I've lost really my family. I don't know. I'm not putting blame on them. I'm not putting blame on me. It's the situation. You know, I'm very sensitive, so I'm sensitive to being around people who I feel hurt by, or I used to be able to pretend. I can't pretend anymore. So it's just that trauma, and when you can't trust and you feel you're wrong all the time because you've this really low self-esteem, really low self-esteem. And, when I got help and I was in that centre, I remember people were saying, like, they were, because I carried myself well and I spoke clearly, they'd say, what's she doing here? And I remember the therapist said, when I was in that group, I was in bits, and the therapist said, all of you have a tiny bit of self-esteem, like you've all that little bit of self-esteem, like you don't have much, but you've a little bit of self-esteem. So when something happens in your life, you get rejected or whatever, you have that little bit of self-esteem to hold on to. And she said, I was shocked. She said, Niamh has none. She's nothing to grasp onto. Niamh has none. So Niamh completely collapses, and that's why, I would feel I have nothing and nobody when things go wrong. I just feel so lost and so alone. And it's something I suppose that I'd experienced at that time in my life. I felt so alone. I don't know why, I wasn't really close to my siblings, I suppose, at the time. My 3 sisters were married with children and, had their own lives. And then my eldest brother was he married? Yeah, he was married, and he probably had, oh no, he wasn't married. No, they weren't. Sorry, they weren't married. So I don't know why I don't know where that came from. I was thinking of the other bit when when I went to the police, I didn't, but I don't know why I didn't tell them, as in, like, what do you say? I did something wrong. I got into a car. I did something wrong. I shouldn't have been in the bowling alley. I shouldn't have been out when it was dark. I shouldn't have accepted somebody to walk me home. I just felt to blame, and I think you have to go through that experience to understand what it feels like, really. But I just want to explain, you just go through life afraid people will find out who you really are. And if they find out who you really are, they won't like you. So you try to hide that deep inside, but that rots away. And it's like a cancer. It actually eats away. And and it doesn't go. It's like grief. It might get a little bit more, but it can be triggered at any time. So the other thing I'll just say is the one thing I always said how it affected me was my thing is somebody trying to control me, or feeling they own me. So if somebody tries to control me, so if a man tries to say, you know, you're not doing that, or we're going there, or you know, like, I can't describe it. Like he tries to buy you with gifts and things like that, and then expects you to live the way he wants you to live, or something like that. I can't describe it. It's just my hackles, like, it's like every hair on my neck goes up. It's like, because I've that fear of being controlled. So, you know, I don't know. And people, I'm sure, have different ways of dealing with it, and people have different kind of, you know, I survived because I had to. I did try not to survive twice. On two occasions, I tried to leave planet Earth. It didn't work. And then I think I also self-abused for years as well afterwards, which is like a slow suicide. But I did survive. But, you know, I don't know that thing of like, I'm a survivor. I'm, you know, people call us survivors. We survive because we have to. You know, I don't know how I feel about that word, survivor. Yeah, I'm not brave because I've survived. It's like, you know, if somebody survives from cancer, it's like, oh, you're a cancer survivor. Like, well, we don't really have a choice. You either survive or you don't, you know. And I don't think it's because I'm any better a person than somebody else that I got on with my life and it looked semi-normal on the outside. You know, on the inside it was not anything but normal. But also, I just want to say, though, there's always two sides to my story, in the sense, not that there's their side and my side. I mean, there's like, there were good times in my teen years. There were good times in my 20s. It wasn't all this. Definitely, it was that line running through me, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't all of it. And I need to say that for myself, because I don't want to give all the power to those two young men who changed the course of my life forever. So, and the people around them as well. So, you know, I did survive, and I'm grateful I survived, and I'm grateful to be able to tell the story today. But I also think that it's important that people who have gone through this talk about it, because it gives other people courage to talk about it, or it gives them also that feeling of not being alone. So anyone out there who's gone through this, you are not alone. There's me, and there's so many people I know who have gone through this, and it's not, you know, it's not supposed to happen. It's not the way things are meant to be. And, you know, there is help out there, but, you know, just find some solace in knowing that you're not alone. It's going on all over the world. Not that that makes it right or makes it any better, but just know you're not alone, and try just to hang on in there. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll talk to you very soon. Bye.